Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you with us this morning. So, what advice, what information do you have for us this morning if we are talking about flu season, vaccinations, levels of preparation and readiness in that regard?
Okay, so looking at the influenza vaccine, not COVID vaccine because we don't have one. The influenza vaccine, we're actually just gotten into the influenza season. It normally starts around October and runs till around May or so. And the vaccine, as you know, is here. It's available. It's a good vaccine. It's a safe vaccine. You need to take it every year. So even if you got it sort of January, February of this year, that is the last flu season. We're in a new flu season. And so I would strongly urge people to get the influenza vaccine, particularly now, because since COVID is around, we're in community transmission. What you don't want is to run the risk of having COVID and influenza at the same time, or one and then shortly after the next, because one is going to wear your body down and then you're going to be hit with a second virus, which means your ability to fight it would have been lessened. So we don't have a vaccine for COVID, but we do have one for influenza that is very safe. I've had mine. I've made sure my family have had theirs. This year, more than ever, I would encourage everybody to get that influenza vaccine.
And the influenza vaccine, and just again to reinforce, because sometimes people hear information, the tail end of it only listen for certain things. We're not talking about COVID-19. We're talking about the regular influenza vaccine, the upgraded one for the new flu season. It is readily available in all the health centers?
Correct. And you just need to go ahead and go get the vaccine. It's free at the health centers as well. And yes, we're speaking about the influenza vaccine. It's the new one for this year because every year the influenza virus may change itself just a little bit. And so you need to have a vaccine that matches it exactly every year. So even if you had it early this year, it is advisable definitely to go and get it now. This is a new flu season that only started in October.
And just so we can understand that process as well, and as you said, because it mutates, it changes, it adjusts, it changes certain ways. So therefore, what you took last year would not be valid for this year. If someone, for example, I don't know if the vaccines, the old one, how long it was being taken for. For example, if someone had a vaccine in June, July, would that still be relevant, or do you have to take the new one now?
No, it would not be relevant because the new season would have started in October. So if you had a vaccine before that time, it would not be relevant. But I do believe that the ministry had stopped the vaccinations maybe by May because the end of the flu season is May. Right. But even if you had it in June, you're right, you still need the one for this year because the one you would have had any time before October would have been the composition for the virus that was circulating last flu season.
And are you encouraging, Dr. Boisson, everyone to get the vaccination, or specific groups, specific vulnerable groups should get the vaccination especially?
Sure, it's certainly advisable for everybody, but in particular, the vulnerable groups, because these are the groups that if they get influenza, they're likely to become severely sick, be hospitalized, or worst case perish. So we're speaking about similar vulnerable group to those vulnerable for COVID-19, older persons, those with comorbidities, also pregnant women for influenza as well, and the under fives for influenza as well.
Are there any risks attached to this? Because, again, it's not about the whole buying into the whole anti-vaxxer movement sort of thing, but people might say, for example, if you're pregnant, if you're carrying a child and so on, you might be anxious if in case there might be any consequences of taking a vaccine. Are there any risks attached at all?
No, we have not seen any risk whatsoever for pregnant women to have the influenza vaccine. All we have seen is benefits, because pregnant women are more vulnerable to severe influenza disease. So it is strongly recommended for pregnant women. There's been no adverse events connected with the child or the pregnant woman when she's had the influenza vaccine. It has been proven to be very safe and to be quite beneficial.
And because we are in the era of COVID-19, if someone had COVID and has fully recovered, or maybe they're still recovering, can you take the influenza vaccine?
Normally, if you are already ill you would not be given a vaccine at that time. But if you have been ill and recovered, absolutely, definitely, because it means you're still susceptible to influenza. If you've had COVID, COVID is completely different to influenza caused by a completely different virus. So if you've had COVID-19 and you've recovered, yes, definitely still go and get your influenza vaccine because you don't want to get influenza as well.
But can COVID cause complications in relation to the influenza vaccine? The reason I ask, and I know you're shaking your head already, is that I mean you follow what is happening with COVID, and there are some maybe unique or very rare cases of people getting COVID and suffering the symptoms for weeks and possibly months. So is there a concern in that regard about overlapping situations there?
I see what you mean. No, you mean if you've had COVID-19 and you've gotten over it and then you had the flu vaccine, would it bring on more symptoms of COVID-19?
Correct.
If that's
Correct.
the question?
Yes.
No, the influenza vaccine has not shown to be linked in any way to COVID-19. So even if you've had it before, had COVID-19, you don't need to worry that if you have the influenza vaccine, that it will cause any sort of reaction with the COVID virus at all. Completely different vaccine to what you would want to take for COVID-19. And the vaccine for influenza does nothing as it relates to the COVID-19 symptoms. So once you're over your COVID-19, absolutely safe to go and get the influenza vaccine. It will not bring back COVID symptoms.
And I know we're talking primarily about the influenza vaccine and people getting their vaccinations, but what is your perspective on what we see as the results coming out of testing for COVID-19? Because just this morning, the University of Oxford is reporting that their vaccine that they are developing shows 70% protection, similar numbers for AstraZeneca, I believe. And of course, a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of excitement generated by Pfizer and Moderna with 90% protection, almost 95% protection. Are you encouraged by all of this?
I am very encouraged. I mean, I am amazed. I didn't think I would see something like this in my lifetime in terms of the speed at which a vaccine has been developed or is being developed, because it's not been developed yet. It's not been approved yet. And I know that is a concern for some people, that speed at which it's being developed. But I think what we need to understand is the process of development. When your vaccine is being developed, you have a preclinical phase of trials where the vaccine is tested on animals, non-humans, in a safe way and a humane way, of course. And then you have 3 phases, 4 clinical phases, where it's tested on humans. Phase 1, 2, and 3. And normally the way vaccines are developed, you finish one phase and then go to the next phase. So you complete your preclinical, then go to clinical phase 1, then clinical phase 2, then clinical phase 3. And you have more and more people for each of the phases that you are doing the tested on. And these are people who would have volunteered. So it's not being done in any sort of sinister way. What has happened because of the need for a vaccine as quickly as possible because of what the virus is doing to the world is that the rigor has not been changed. But instead of doing the trials sequentially, they are doing them in parallel. So phase 1, 2, and 3 in parallel so that it can be going much faster. In addition to that, there is a huge focus around the world. Many different companies, organizations are working on this at the same time. And so that is the reason for the speed of the development. And even so, we still do not have an approved vaccine yet, even though so far those who've gotten to clinical trials, phase 3, they would have already have tested on tens of thousands of people. So for me, once we have completed all those 3 phases and the vaccine has gotten that approval from the technical advisory group, the global one, I would have no qualms. I would be very comfortable taking that vaccine because it would have gone through the rigors of testing that all the other vaccines that I take have already gone through.
And because this is being done at unprecedented speed and before time runs out on us, are you willing to venture when you think this actual vaccine will be readily available? Are we talking a couple of months or even longer?
I couldn't say for sure because, you know, it's not over till it's over. You can get very close and then you may have a setback. So until the vaccine is approved, it's not approved. But we are hopeful that by early next year, before the middle of next year, based on how we see things going, we are hopeful to have a vaccine by then.
I'm glad you used that phrase. It's not over till it's over, because we're talking about H1N1 vaccine as well. And we're also talking about the English Premier League. There's only 9 games gone, Doctor. You have another 29 games to go. And I know it's been a long wait, so don't put on this Spurs shirt as yet, because you might be disappointed again. But thanks very much, as always, Dr. Boisson, for taking the time to join us this morning.
You are most welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I think you should get a shirt, though. I think you should be ready just in case.
Watch it. Be careful, Doc. Be careful. Thanks very much again. But yes, they've been waiting quite some time. So who knows? It's early days yet in the English Premier League season. They are top of the table on goal difference over the defending champions, Liverpool. But of course, she was talking primarily about the H1N1. Just remember that we're not talking about COVID-19. Talking about H1N1, regular flu season. The vaccines are available. You are urged to take it. Yeah, there are no risks attached to it, as we heard from the good doctor as well. So take your vaccine as well and ensure that you're protected, especially if you're vulnerable, but it's available to everyone to have that vaccine. And you do have to update if you would have taken the one from last year.